As fantastic a CFP as Mel O is, as wonderful an attorney as I am, and as good as Stormy is at whatever it is he does, please do note that anything said in our podcasts are our opinions alone and are not meant to be taken as financial or legal advice.
Welcome to Finances, the Other F Word, a Gen Xer podcast for musicians and music lovers, where we discuss money and music without all the pretentious bullshit. Here are your hosts, Zoe Terry, attorney at large, Stormy Andrews, founder of Yokel Local Marketing, and Mel O, certified financial planner and author of Finances, the Other F Word. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, welcome to Finance is the Other F Word. Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about cons. So unfortunately in my industry and the financial industry, there's a lot of different cons that people fall victim to, as well as just, pulling the wool over some clients' eyes when they sit down with the financial advisor. And so I was really curious to see if there was ever any music-related cons. I mean, obviously we all know about Milli Vanilli, right? We've already talked about them on the podcast before, where their record skipped. And I didn't think it was a record. I don't know. Was it a CD? Because it was Girl, You Know It's True. And it was on Club MTV, and it's Girl, You Know It's, Girl, You Know It's. But I can't believe that in 80-something, or was that early 90s? That they were still
88.
using 88?
No, late 80s.
So was it a DVD, not a DVD, was it a CD that was skipping or a record? That just seems kind of weird that they would have a record and not a tape. But anyway, whatever item they had ended up skipping, and then of course that blew everything apart, and they had to put and give their Grammy back and everything. So Zoe did a little bit of research for us, and she has some interesting things of different cons that have happened in the music industry besides, again, Milli Vanilli.
Well, another one, a bit like Milli Vanilli. Excuse me. That's a great start.
I thought that was the name of the band.
I thought it was the Three Coughs.
Exactly.
Oh, you know them? Oh, that's shady. Very
Look,
shady.
as much crazy shit bands as you've mentioned in here, that would probably be an upgrade.
Right.
Well,
And if she said that, I'd believe her story. I'd be like,
Absolutely.
I've never heard of them. But and then she's like, oh,
look them up. Me and my sister used to dance to them in
Right.
our bedrooms.
Oh, Lord.
There was Black Box, were also big in the 90s. I'm not making it up.
Okay.
No, Black. Oh, I know where your mind went. No, Black. Black Box.
Oh, Black Box.
Everybody.
Oh, them. Is that a Black Box?
Everybody.
Okay,
That's Black
I know
Box.
that group.
Do you know that song?
I know that song, absolutely.
Okay, he knows that song. All right, and it's not X-rated like he's thinking. Go ahead.
No, filthy mind.
I've seen that.
Same kind of thing as Milli Vanilli. They used a very skinny French model to lip sync their songs that were actually recorded by Martha Wash, who had demoed a whole bunch of records for them and didn't realize that they were then going to actually release them with some skinny French model mouthing the words that she'd actually sung. So and then Mel has another story involving the very talented Martha Wash.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I was jumping in there because Martha Wash is part of the two-team duo that sings "Rain and Men."
Excellent song.
Great
It's
song by the Weather
raining.
Girls.
That one?
Yes,
Oh my gosh.
by the Weather Girls. That is, and she can fucking belt. And "Raining Men" is one of my favorite songs. There has been so many times I've had my
That song
convertible
sucks.
up. What? Shut the fuck up.
What did he just say?
He said it sucks.
It sucks.
Oh.
Rip off the roof and stay in bed. I'm not even going to try to
out
hit. It's rain. Get soaking
Soaking
wet.
wet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why you're saying it like a spoken word album album over there.
I don't even know either. I was getting all so excited.
I
that
know you were
started-
so tense.
I know.
Jesus Christ.
Because
So,
I take it potentially Raining Men very seriously.
did you take vitamins before you came in the studio today? Because you should probably lay the fuck off of them.
I'm
Jesus
running on very little sleep, and this is how I
Christ.
go.
Okay, so Martha Wash was part of the Weather Girls, and on top of that, actually the same exact thing happened to her. Well, not the same. As far as the video goes, with CNC Music Factory. Everybody Dance Now. Everybody dance now. And and Freedom Williams, I think was his name. I can't remember, but he always had a ponytail, no shirt on, and he was always jumping. For some reason, like when he danced, like people would dance and he's just jumping.
Dance to the rhythm now. Was that one?
I don't know. I don't think that's CNC Music Factory.
Oh, are they?
Okay.
Just made
So
it
back
up.
to me, Freedom Williams. And so Martha Wash did that obviously that hook in the song, Everybody Dance Now. And they had another model in the video actually lip syncing the words to her. And I think you looked it up and she actually sued them.
Yep.
In the interviews, Martha Wash had said that when she saw the video, she had no idea what was going on. It was like somebody grabbed her throat and ripped her throat out and put it in somebody else, and it was a big deal. But I understand she settled that case.
Yeah.
And got money, I'm assuming. Obviously, it's if you're settling it, somebody's getting money, right?
Yes.
I mean, a settlement normally is not, okay, let's just all break ways, right?
Usually there's monetary amounts, and usually it's confidential. So I'm sure she wasn't just looking for, I'm really sorry about that. I'm sure she was looking for some kind of damages. But
they could have just said no offense.
They could have. That's true.
Yeah, I'm sure that would have worked too.
But the thing, okay, so we need to talk about that just for 1 second. I'm trying to get us off. But so there's a documentary on Netflix. It's 20 Feet from Stardom. And it talks about all of these background singers, but it's mostly background singers from like the 60s and the 70s and that kind of stuff. So technically, Martha Wash, let's just say in CNC Music Factory, Everybody Dance Now, she was the backup singer. She got paid as a studio musician or a studio vocalist to sing those background vocals. Why would it be that she would have a problem? No, it was because it was uncredited. That was what the lawsuit with Marsha Wass was, the CNC Music Factory. It's not that the fact that the model was actually lip syncing her. It was the fact that they did not credit her on the song as being one of the vocalists. But for Black Box, it was that they released the video and didn't even tell her and didn't monetize her, correct?
Right. She just done some demo songs for them, and then they just went ahead and released them and had this
and put their name on it, and that's where the true
French
problem
model.
comes in.
Yeah.
Okay, because that would really suck, But as a backup singer or as any studio musician, there's a lot of studio musicians that made a lot of great hooks, and they came up with them themselves, and they are not credited to those studio musicians. They're actually credited to the name, say it be Billy Joel or Frank Sinatra or whatever the case is.
Right.
So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, and there's a lot of famous artists like Jennifer Lopez, TLC, Britney Spears, Selena Gomez, where it's been rumored that it's not really them, but they're backing singers that have done most of the work on some of their more famous records. So that's just a
Records
So
if it's
sad.
1980,
Do
but
you think
okay.
it's
CDs
I
now.
keep my hands to myself? Dun-dun. She said Selena Gomez. Doesn't she sing that?
I have no idea what Selena
wow,
Gomez
you're so
sings.
hip with the kids.
Yes. I don't know. You tell us.
I know that
Stormy.
song. That's a great song. Wow. How about
Wow.
that?
All
I
your
was
younger
wondering if that was
fans will
lip sync.
be so impressed.
That's right. Or 12-year-old and younger. That one was for you. Jesus Christ. Well, but it's the same thing. We had talked about this on a former podcast that Ozzy is the rumor going around is that for years and years, and if you've ever heard any type of interview with Ozzy, he can't fucking
Put two
speak.
words together.
Yeah, he can't speak to save his life, but somehow he can miraculously sing. But the rumor going around is that for years and years and years, there's somebody who is off stage singing at the Ozzy concerts and is actually the one doing most of the primary singing, and that Ozzy is not really singing for himself. So, when I saw Ozzy the couple times I did, he was not the best singer. And I would just assume that would have to be him, because if you're going to have a backup singer trying to sing for you, you wouldn't want them to not really sound great. I would assume you'd want them to sound wonderful, so people go away from the concert like, oh my God, he was wonderful.
Surely you know what you're getting though with Ozzy now.
Yeah, and I would go see him again, maybe. I saw him a couple times, and he's the drugs are catching up to him. I don't want to. He's the father of metal. I don't want to talk shit about him, but
And he's from
my
neck of the woods.
England.
Well,
Yes,
he's not just from England, he's from Birmingham, from near where I was born.
but not where you were born. So just because he was born 20 miles away from you, somehow that ties you to him?
No, the county where I was born, Birmingham.
So, like, was he born next to you? Like, next door to
Yeah,
you?
in the bed next to me, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yes,
Or the house
probably.
next to you?
He
Or-
could be my dad. I'll ask my dad if really.
I would
it's
love it if
not-
Ozzy was your dad.
Yes.
He could be. I'll ask my dad and
Do
say,
it.
you know.
Yeah, because,
really,
I mean, everybody knows everybody in Birmingham. I heard.
Probably.
I
But
heard.
anyway. But most of my family sound like him, is what I mean. There's a real regional
They can't put words
dialects.
together either.
You probably would have a hard time understanding them. Ask my husband, because some of them have very profound Birmingham accents, and he will just nod and smile a lot at some of them because they're quite
Something to
hard
look forward to. We're going to have him on the podcast. Sounds like a winner.
Yeah. And then ask him about his obsession with scissoring. Okay, moving on.
No, I was
So-
talking about Todd. I was talking about your British family that nobody can understand.
Oh yeah, we'll have them on, I'm sure. Get my
All I hear is crikey. Wait, no, Australians say crikey, right?
yeah, we say blimey, bloomin' hell, you know, really hardcore stuff, and we
Yeah.
love the C word, but I won't
Right.
say that, obviously.
I don't know. You've said a lot of worse things than the C word, but anyway, okay, go on.
Okay, so people we probably haven't heard of, but
Really? Do you think?
I know. Well, it's an interesting story.
Okay.
There was a genius pianist called Joyce. Oh, you
Pianist.
motherfuckers.
I think of that joke with the 12-inch
Yes.
pianist. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so she played the piano, and she was a genius.
Piano player? Okay.
Yes, and she was called Joyce Hatto, and it wasn't until a year after she died in 2006, and she'd been hailed as a genius for all of her life, and it wasn't until 2007, a year after her death, that it was her recordings were investigated, and it was discovered that she was an absolute fraud, and that all of her recordings had been lifted from other recordings or digitally manipulated. That sounds rude now too, but anyway.
That was all you. Stormy and I
Okay,
were quiet
all right.
as
You were
church mice
listening.
over here.
Thank you. And the way they discovered it was when iTunes came up with the correct title for her discs when they put them. Do you know what I mean? The
Oh,
correct
right.
title came up, and it wasn't her title, and realized that she was, yes, a massive fraud. So that was
She died. Did she die rich? Do you know?
I don't know. I didn't look that up. but
I'm
I should
assuming
have
she
done.
was pretty successful.
Yes,
So that's
yeah.
unfortunate.
But that's very naughty. There's you'll like this one because it's your kind of music, but a Chinese black death metal band called Ghost Bath.
Black death metal. It's usually black metal or death metal.
Oh,
I've
black metal. Sorry,
Black metal.
I added,
okay, I was like,
added the
wow,
death.
that's some really hard
Yeah.
shit.
I
It's
added the
n-
death.
Not
'cause
black
it all-
metal or death metal. It's black death
Death
metal. It's
metal.
like, holy shit.
Sorry
That's going to
about
blow
that.
my
Yeah.
fucking brains out. Okay.
They were formed in 2012, and they pretended to be Chinese for some reason. And in 2015, it was discovered they were actually 4 dudes from North Dakota. So
How do you how
I'm
do you
not
pretend you're
I'm
Chinese?
not even sure, and I'm not even sure why.
So
But they
So
did.
This is a totally random story, but this is 100% true. One of my clients that I had a long time ago used to be one of the actual kids that played in The King and I.
Right?
We're talking about what this movie's like at 1940 or 50. I'm not a movie buff, so I don't really know.
I love that movie though.
But
yeah.
what it was the 40s or 50s?
Yeah.
It was I know it was black and white. So
Let's go with the 50s.
okay.
Look it up.
So what they did, and he was telling me, is that in order to make them look Asian,
Yeah.
they took toothpicks and they pulled the skin of their eyes back and taped them, and then the wigs would go over, and so you wouldn't see the toothpicks, and that's how they actually made their eyes look more Asian-ish in the almond shape. So that's why I'm just kind of curious how the band actually acted as if they were from China.
I don't know. We'll have to. Maybe I should have looked into it more, but it just was funny.
Did you find something interesting? Stormy has a gleam in his eye.
No,
Okay.
just 1956.
Yeah. I thought it was in the
1956
50s.
is King and I.
King
Okay.
and I. Okay. Another. This is a Japanese guy. I'm going to torture his name, I'm sure. Mamoru Samuragochi. He was called the Japanese Beethoven, and he was exposed as a fraud in 2014. He was his most famous composition was called the Hiroshima Symphony, and it was dedicated to all those that were killed in the 1945 atomic blast. He sold over 100,000 copies of that particular record in Japan. But as it turned out, and he had a career spanning 1996 to 2014.
Wow.
And it turned out that he didn't write that or the majority of his work over that 18-year career. He'd paid a part-time music teacher called Takashi Nigaki to compose them. And he'd also told people that had convinced people that he was deaf for some reason.
Wow.
And he wasn't. So double naughty liar.
The best thing out of that story that I loved is that when she first tried to pronounce the guy's name, she tried to do it with an inflection
With
like
a Japanese accent.
But then when she got to Hiroshima, where she could have just said Hiroshima, she's like, Hiroshima, like some crazy accent on that. And I'm thinking, wow, so you do know how to pronounce Hiroshima. Probably the accent is not necessary, but that was the best part of that whole story. You're welcome.
Okay. And my favorite one that I found is actually...
Is this an English name? Because I don't know if I can sit through that anymore.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm probably going to say it wrong, but it's a US band. It's a band, and this happened just last year, just November of last year. It's a band from LA called Threatin, Threatin, and it's, like I said, a band from LA who's led by Jared Threatin. He somehow managed to book a whole load of gigs in Europe and convinced them that he had sold advance tickets and managed to set up a whole fraud, basically. He had this huge social media following, that it was going to be sellout shows. He had all these venues sold out in Europe. And it turned out that he had a fake label, which was non-existent, fake promotion agency, fake press releases. And when the band actually got to the venue, on a couple of occasions 2 people would show up, because he was for shit, basically. He'd managed to just somehow fake it till he made it.
But he didn't make it.
And there's a photograph online of his band up on stage in some venue in Brighton, I think it was, or Bristol in England, and 2 people just stood in the audience, which would be mildly amusing if it wasn't for the fact that, there were supporting bands and lots of other people that were out of money because of this guy absolutely faking that he was some successful band.
But there are so many levels on that, because you have to convince a venue or a club owner that you sold a whole bunch of advance tickets that you can't prove, or if you do, it's obviously falsified. But how do you convince that venue, specifically from overseas, that you have all of these advance tickets sold to their actual venue, and then not have payment to them first? Because obviously that wouldn't make sense if he was paying the venues to play, saying he had all these advance tickets sold.
He apparently paid himself for some of the...
Well, then he is a stupid motherfucker.
Yeah, I know.
But you know what? And we talked about on the very first podcast episode about the Fire Festival and the Orange Tile and all of the influencers and all that kind of stuff, and having all this social media following, and that people just get tied up in stuff that's, oftentimes bullshit.
Yeah, he got caught up in his own bullshit. He just faked it all, and I don't know if he thought maybe, who knows, but when the band actually played, there was nobody there.
Was there any financial consequences that you know of?
Now nobody can track him down, pretty much.
Hey, that sounds like a lot of guys in my industry. So the reason why we wanted to talk about this a little bit today is because there's a lot of financial news and everything kind of moving around. And we had a 2008 episode where we talked a lot about the larger banks and the smaller banks too, and just kind of some of the greed that was rampant and some of the things that happened. But one of the things that we saved for this podcast specifically is talking about Ponzi scheme. So Bernie Madoff was a huge name in and around 2008, and he ran one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in history. His son ended up, I believe, committing suicide or died of cancer or something really tragic. And there was some tragic that befell his family. And as he was, the feds were getting closer and the SEC was getting closer to slapping the handcuffs on him, what he ended up doing was he started taking his assets and he started just giving them away to family members to try to hide them and tuck them away. And how a Ponzi scheme works, and there are lots of different Ponzi schemes that run around out there, but this one got the most attention because it was by far the biggest. And for people who had never experienced a Ponzi scheme, it brought into focus exactly what a Ponzi scheme is for them. So this is how a Ponzi scheme works. Let's say that Stormy invests with an advisor, and he's person A, okay? He comes in, he invests with an advisor, and then the advisor says, hey, great, and I'm going to invest your money. Then I come in and I go to the same advisor and then I invest my money in with the advisor. And then Zoe comes in after me and then she invests money with the advisor. So all three of us now have money invested with the advisor. Stormy's money's first, mine's second, Zoe's third. What ends up happening is that the advisor tells Stormy versus statements and other things, hey, you're doing so great. I'm investing. I'm a fucking, hero. And Stormy sees all of these returns, these positive returns coming in his account. And he's like, man, my advisor's killing it. Well, in actuality, what's happening is that the advisor is just taking my money that I brought in to give Stormy his returns.
That's right.
There's no actual investment. And then what he's doing in turn is he's taking Zoe's money and he's giving her money to me and I'm doing air quotes, I always do this and nobody can see me, in as far as returns. And what ends up happening is that nobody asks what's going on, and they're just so happy because they're getting these returns. So 2008 is coming, everything's going the shitter, but Bernie Madoff is such a fucking rock star. His returns are still going off the chart. Doesn't matter that you don't understand what you're invested in. It doesn't matter if the stuff you're invested in is even legitimate. The fact is that you're seeing returns that are making it. Where a Ponzi scheme goes awry is when Stormy comes in to the advisor and says, I'm terrified of the market because it's 2008. Give me all my money. I'm going to close my account and put it in a bank. And then I come in and say, I'm terrified of the stock market. Give me all my money. I'm going to put it in a bank. And then Zoe comes in. And what happens is since you don't have any new people coming into the firm bringing in new money, then all of the returns fall like a house of cards. And what you in essence have is you have a run on the firm trying to pull out all their money, and there's no actual returns there. There's no actual investments there. There's nothing there of value. And then what ends up happening is the whole thing falls in on itself. And that's what ended up happening. Of course, Bernie Madoff, I believe he is still alive and sitting in jail, and fuck him. And like I said, Ponzi schemes are prevalent, and a lot of times they're not going to be to that specific, that size by any means. But they're things that you need to look out for. If you don't really understand what you're invested in, you need to make sure that you ask your investment advisor. If you're looking at stuff and it's too complicated, or if they're trying to specifically lose you in their words, that's also a red flag. You need to make sure that you understand what you're investing in. I'm not saying you need to understand Sharpe ratios and standard deviations and alphas, but what I'm telling you is that if somebody says, you're invested in blah, 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 what does that mean? Am I invested in technology? Am I invested in real estate? Am I invested in healthcare? Things like this. These are things that you need to be asking your advisors. And you have to understand with our industry, there are items that pay you higher commission, that pay the highest commission. Life insurance is one of them, and annuities is the other. Now, when an annuity works for a client, there's nothing that works better for it. Annuities have a bad rap because they are one of the highest payers in our industry. But when you have a need, and if it fits and aligns with what an annuity can do for you, nothing can beat an annuity. And so I don't give a fuck how much the commission difference is on the product. If it fits your need and helps solve your objective and gets you to where you're trying to go, it's not a bad product. But what you have is you have a lot of advisors who would do things like this and will put you in products that are going to yield them the highest commission because they're obviously not thinking of you. And we had the biggest one that came in early in 2000 that everybody might remember is Enron. So if you invest in the stock market or don't invest in the stock market, you knew the name of Enron. And when I was working for Wells Fargo, one of our security guards, and this is just a really sad story, he had literally lost everything he had in Enron. He had tons of Enron stock, and he just kept putting more and more and more money in Enron stock, and he got highly concentrated in the position. Quite frankly, his wife never forgave him, and she made it pretty clear, which was the saddest part. And he lost everything in Enron, and they ended up scaling down from a very big, beautiful house where I believe that they had a chauffeur to living in a very small, possibly rented house. And he was working multiple jobs to try to make up his money that he lost in Enron and her money that he lost in Enron. And so, you know, when you're hearing Ponzi scheme and you're hearing Enron, you know, a lot of people with the Bernie Madoff, since he catered to such a high clientele, you know, a lot of times it's easy to be like, oh, fuck those guys. It serves them right. Okay. But you have to remember that it doesn't matter if you have $1,000 or $1 million. If you lose everything, you've lost everything. Okay. Whether it's $1 million or $1,000. So what ended up happening with Enron is that they did a lot of kind of conniving and aggressive accounting practices, and they hid a lot of their debt. So there's a lot of talk going on right now about people being under investigation for things similar to this. So Enron went and they had hid a lot of their debt, and then they had inflated their assets. So they had said that their assets were worth much, much more, and they hid their debt with a lot of these practices. Then what they had was an auditor company come in, Arthur Anderson come in and audit their financials. And the understanding is that they caught it, but Enron was like, no, just kind of ignore that. And what ended up happening was when all of this ended up coming to light, and they started investigating. At one point in the mid 2000s, their stock price was around $90. And at the end of 2001-ish, their stock price was at $1, which qualifies them as a penny stock at that time. And so if you were a shareholder working at MGM Casino and you had Enron stock, you've just lost your investment in Enron stock, okay? But if you're an employee of Enron, not only have you just lost the stock that you have probably got by an ESOP plan, an employee stock option plan, so that's now worthless, but you've also lost your pension because now the company's insolvent, and the whole company went into Chapter 11. To make things worse, what they ended up doing is when the SEC finally caught on to this, not only did they end up, Anderson lost their license, their auditing license, and had to close their doors. This was one of the top 10 auditing companies at that time I don't know if it's in the world, but definitely in the United States. And because of the fiasco with Enron, they ended up going out of business. So everybody that was associated with Anderson as an audit company lost their jobs. Enron stock price is now shit. All this stuff comes to light. They were, snowballing a lot of the board of directors, and they were using a lot of very creative accounting practices that they shouldn't have. And when the SEC came in to investigate, they got fined for destroying documents that the SEC, this is a Securities Exchange Commission, we've talked about them on our Fire Festival episode, they came in to do research and to do an investigation, and the audit firm had actually destroyed all of those records.
Arthur Anderson did the destroying? Arthur
Anderson.
Wow.
The audit company did it. So imagine the panic with them at that point, that they know that the SEC is breathing down their neck. They know they fucked up. So their choice to fix the fuck up is to try to shred the evidence or destroy the evidence in whatever way they did, which ended up compounding it. And because of that, there was laws that came out that are now in effect. This is why the thing's going on right now, you guys. This is why this is a big deal. There's laws right now that are going into effect where if you mislead people, if you're a public company and you mislead people and you mislead stockholders, that's never a good thing. It's never been a good thing, and that's a problem. But if you specifically destroy evidence, documents, recordings, whatever the case is, that show that you have been using these practices, then that is where it comes into felony terms. And this is why this is such a big deal. This is why, inflating your assets and trying to hide your debts in order to maybe be able to get more loans and stuff like that. That's why this is such a big deal.
Wow.
And one of the reasons why they got rid of this, another way they could do this is because their statements for their stockholders were purposely complex. So they literally, and this is why I tell you, if you sit down with an advisor and they're trying to lose you in their language, make them stop and fucking explain it to you like you're a child. Why are you smiling at me, Stormy?
It's funny.
What's funny about that? That's horrible.
It's horrible, but it's funny.
He has a warped, Sandra, my God, he has a warped sense of humor. So the point is that they created all of these very complex financial structures. So remember in the 2000 episode, we talked about what the banks did. They created very complex structures that nobody could understand.
Right.
Then they take all those crazy-ass complex structures and they ended up putting them into very hard-to-read statements so nobody knew what the fuck was going on. Enron collapsed. And a whole bunch of people lost their money. So there's a lot of fraudsters out there, whether they're on a much smaller scale or whether on the bigger scale, even in the music industry. And I'm surprised, Zoe, that you didn't mention the Monkees.
Hey, we're the Monkees.
Yeah, and Peter York just passed.
What happened with the Monkees?
Well, no, I had mentioned it to Mel as in that they were a fake band that they're on TV, and then they became a real band.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they had.
They were a TV band.
They wanted to sing all their own stuff, but
to begin with, their instruments weren't even plugged in. They weren't, they weren't doing any of it.
But
real.
they were musicians.
Right.
But what they ended up doing
some of them were more actors than musicians, but.
And they turned them into, instead of having them want to be a band, they turned them into the sitcom with the Monkees, and then they had all of their albums and everything that come out. That was all studio musicians and everything.
Who just passed away?
Peter York.
When?
Like a couple months ago. He was I got my guy on it. He's the drummer, I believe. He's drummer for the Monkees. I want to say he died in April. May?
They were not a good-looking band, though,
March or April. No, they were not. But there was the
little
short
one was.
The little short guy everybody liked with a Daydream Believer.
I loved that show. We had that in England too, and I watched that.
Yeah, well, they revived the Monkees on MTV, and it was hot and heavy from like 85 to 87. They played all the old episodes, and that's how I even know who the Monkees are. Do we got a date on that? I'm gonna go with March
Peter
or
York
April.
or Peter Tork?
Oh, Tork. I'm sorry, Peter Tork. Yeah, and I'm gonna go with March or April is when he passed, and I believe he was the drummer. If Marianne,
Zoe, what do you got?
If Marianne was here, she'd know.
She's going with March or April.
This year.
I didn't even know he died, so don't ask me.
No. Let's take a different month that's close to one of hers, so you can prove her wrong.
No.
Third time's a charm.
Like maybe
what
right
did
before. She said March, April. I'd go right before.
Like February?
Yes, February. You are right.
Oh,
Zoe.
you guys both suck.
Wow.
You guys both suck balls. You guys are horrible people.
And then, of course, there's the most famous fake band ever, Spinal Tap.
Yeah, but Spinal Tap
was a fake band?
Yes. Spinal Tap was a parody movie.
I know.
Gotcha.
And it goes to 11. And that was
Turn
Lenny.
it all the way up to 11.
That was Lenny.
That was my favorite band.
No, it wasn't.
Spinal Tap? Are you kidding me?
Oh my God! Stop it! No, Laverne and Shirley. Hello,
Yes.
Lenny. I don't know why you sounded.
Lenny and Squiggy.
Why'd
British.
you always say hello?
I don't know, but they do it. Hello. That's how you would come in. So Lenny, he was the I believe in the movie he was the lead singer for Spinal Tap, which I honestly did not know that he had done anything after Laverne and Shirley. But I'm not a movie buff, so I know that makes me sound horrible because I'm sure he's done like tons of movies and I just don't know them.
Yeah, you suck.
I suck. I'm striking out. So we're going to end this podcast. I've been having a rough day, and now I think I owe Stormy and Zoe about 4 shots each at this point. Yeah. So as always, just know that our book is available on Amazon. Finance is the other F word. 10% of net proceeds going to Forgotten Not Gone, preventing veteran suicide. And Pause, providing animals with support, saving cats and dogs from euthanization and getting them adopted out. And, of course, follow us on our social media at Finance is the other F word, and on Twitter at Amped Cheddar, AMPED CHEDDAR. And as always, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. If you like the show, please rate and review us and tell your friends.